Hey guys, this is Emily with Snake Discovery, and today we'll be discussing one of many controversial subjects in the reptile community. We'll be going over the pros and cons of each side, and then discussing what we have found to work best with our own animals. This is one of those subjects that a lot of reptile keepers and breeders have strong opinions about, and as a result, we will be keeping an eye on the comments section below. Constructive comments are more than welcome. However, if things kind of get out of hand, basically harassment will not be tolerated, so those comments will be removed, and if it gets too bad, we will have to disable comments for this video. So please remember to play nice in the comments section below. Anyway, I hope this video helps you out when it comes to taking care of your own reptiles, and enjoy! Today we'll be discussing whether it's best to give heat to your snake in the form of a heat lamp from above or a heat mat from below. But first things first, this is Popeye. He is our albino labyrinth mutation Burmese python, and he is just the friendliest Burmese I have ever met. He is a rescue, and due to neglect in his previous home, he was very dehydrated and underweight when we got him, and he still is underweight. I mean, his skin shouldn't be this stretchy, but he has come a long way already. It's been about 6 months, and we are just really excited to have this snake as part of our family. So he'll be joining us today during the video. Let's start with a heat lamp. The pros to a heat lamp from above the enclosure would be that it brightens up the tank so you can see your snake easier, and the snake has a day and night light cycle because you'll turn it off at night. It also will dry out the enclosure if it's too humid, and the heat bulbs remain at a consistent temperature throughout the day. If you turn on a bulb and let it run for an hour and then check the temperature, that's likely going to be the temperature that it remains at throughout the rest of the day. So you can adjust the wattage and the location of the lamp as needed to get the perfect basking spot inside of the tank. The drawbacks to a heat lamp are that they use more electricity than heat mats do, and they may dry out the enclosure too much. To get around this, you can either mist down the enclosure once or twice a day, or you can offer a humidity box, which is just a humid retreat for the snake to go into to rehydrate itself. Another con to heat lamps is that if the basking area is too hot or the basking area is too close to that heat bulb, it can cause dorsal burns on snakes. I have seen this before in a ball python actually. I made a video of it. This is the video right here, where this snake had so many scars from the burns from a heat lamp in its previous home. So you have to be careful with the temperature that the basking spots reach when you use a heat lamp. To monitor temperature, just use a heat gun. They're a lot easier and they're more accurate than the round disc-like thermometers that stick to the back of the tank, or these sticker ones that are like a long rectangular sticker that stick to the glass. Those aren't very accurate anyway. And a heat gun, you can check the temperature throughout the entire enclosure with just the click of a button. One more drawback to the heat lamp method is that it may cause unnatural behavior in snakes. Although diurnal snakes, which are awake during the daytime, will naturally come out and bask in the sun, nocturnal snakes, which are normally asleep during the daylight hours, they would prefer to remain hidden during the day inside of a cave or another hide. If you have a basking light on during the day, the only way for them to get warm is to come out and bask, which isn't quite natural behavior for them. They prefer to remain warm while they're hidden inside of their cave. Because of this, heat mats from below do tend to be a little bit better for the nocturnal species especially. Now let's move on to heat mats. Of course, these allow the snake to remain hidden while it's warm inside of a hide, so that is great for the nocturnal species of snakes, and they also use less electricity than the heat lamps do. However, just like heat lamps, heat mats can overheat as well, especially if you're using a glass enclosure, because the glass gets really hot with those heat mats. Within 20 minutes they can overheat, and it's possible that an unregulated heat mat can burn the belly of your snake. I've seen it before firsthand. It is not a fun thing to deal with, and sometimes it can cause death in snakes too. So to prevent this from happening, always use a thermostat in conjunction with the heat mat. Then you can program the temperature you want the heat mat to remain at, and the thermostat will ensure that it stays within a couple degrees of that set temperature. Unfortunately, this means that the added cost of a thermostat with your heat mat will increase the overall cost of your heating system, but it's worth it for the peace of mind knowing that your snake will not get a burnt belly when you use a thermostat to regulate its temperature. Another pro to heat mats is that they don't dry out the enclosure as much as heat lamps do, which isn't that big of a deal if you're offering a humidity box anyway, but it's still just another pro of heat mats. On the flip side, there are some cons to heat mats as well, one of which being if you use a plastic enclosure and your heat mat gets too hot, it can potentially melt the plastic. But again, this can be prevented by just using a thermostat. One more drawback to using heat mats is that they may only heat up the bottom part of the enclosure, leaving the overall ambient temperature too cool for the snake to live comfortably. To make sure your heat mat is sufficient enough, it should be around 1/3 of the size of the overall enclosure. If you need additional heat from there, then I recommend using a ceramic heat emitter. On the subject of ceramic heat emitters, I'd like to quickly touch on red lights. These are labeled as nighttime bulbs for reptiles, and since they look dimmer to us, they must look dimmer to the snake, right? And the snake thinks it's nighttime, while that red light still provides warmth overnight. Well, reptiles actually can see the red light, and to them, it's just another light in their cage. So if you use a red light at night and a daytime light during the day, the snake is put in a constant sense of daytime, and they don't have a day-night light cycle. This is important for all animals to have a day and night light cycle, just to keep their daily rhythms on track. So if you use the red lights and they're constantly in a state of day, the snake may get stressed or confused, just not knowing when it's nighttime. So if you need additional heat at night, instead of using a red lamp, we recommend using a ceramic heat emitter because those emit no light whatsoever. You may have heard people talk about whether heat lamps are more of a fire hazard than heat mats and vice versa, and the honest truth is both of them are fire hazards if they're not used correctly. If you move a heat lamp while it's still hot onto carpet or onto wood or something, it can start a fire. On the flip side, if you don't correctly hook up a heat mat or wire up your heat tape, that can be a fire hazard too. So basically just play it safe and be responsible when you initially set up your heat element. That means reading all of the instructions on the back of the heat mat package, which there's a lot of instructions, but they are important. And with a heat lamp, if you go that route, use a heat bulb that is within the recommended size that the heat lamp says it is. Every lamp has a label stating the maximum amount of wattage it can handle, and I tend to go a little bit under that just to be safe. Another reason why people prefer heat mats over heat lamps nowadays is because they're a lot easier to maintain and they are out of the way. Once you set up a heat mat to its thermostat, you plug it in, you set the temperature, then you just leave it alone and it does its own thing. 24/7, it keeps that enclosure warm where the heat mat is. Whereas a heat lamp, you have to turn on and off twice a day so the snake has a day and night light cycle. And whenever you want to reach into the enclosure, if you have a screen lid that is, and the light is resting on top, you have to move that light aside in order to sneak your hand into the enclosure to grab your snake, to change water, to clean, things like that. If you have an enclosure that's front opening, that isn't really a big deal because the lamp is out of the way then. But when most people get their first snake, they usually get, a 10-gallon or a 20-gallon tank with that solid screen lid that the lamp rests on, which you then have to move aside in order to get into the enclosure. You can also buy screen lids that are hinged, and those bend up and out of the way, but sometimes the lamp is so big that it covers the hinge too, and then it defeats the purpose of getting a screen lid with a hinge, because you have to move the lamp anyway. So what do we recommend? Well, you can pretty much keep any species of snake successfully using a heat mat with a thermostat, of course, as your heat source. If you have a nocturnal species of snake, then we strongly urge you to use a heat mat over a heat lamp just because they prefer to be hidden while they're warm. But if you have a snake that is diurnal or crepuscular, which means awake during dawn and dusk, and you want to see more natural basking behaviors with that snake, then you can, if you want, use a heat lamp over a heat mat. Some people frown upon it, but we use it for our garter snakes, and we find great basking behavior with them ever since we started using the lamp over a mat. They come out more, they're more active, they eat better for us. So for us, the heat lamp works for the garter snakes. But we keep all of our other snakes on heat mats just because they're a lot easier to set up and maintain. So if you have one of those diurnal or crepuscular snakes, that's a decision that's up to the owner and what works best for them, because the snake, as long as the correct temperature and humidity requirements are met, which may take a few extra precautions if you use a lamp, but if the owner is willing to do all of that, then you can make a lamp work just as well as a heat mat. So I hope today's video helped clear some things up and weigh the pros and cons to each side to help you make a decision when it comes to your snake. Don't forget to keep doing your own research so that you can make a very well-informed decision in the end. Thanks for watching today's video, and we'll see you next time.